Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to our Select Board meeting. It is Monday, December 9th. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so tonight's meeting is the same agenda we had planned for last Monday night, and we postponed that meeting due to inclement weather. So we are taking up the same business that was posted for last week. I'd like to start by welcoming our new town administrator, Chris Coleman, to his first official Select Board meeting.
Thank you.
And we're happy to have you on board. And what is really nice tonight is that we get to welcome our interim town administrator, Michael Gillette, to the meeting and have an overlap for one meeting. And when I realized that we could do this, I really felt like it was a passing of the baton, figuratively speaking. And I know the two of you have had a chance to overlap for a couple of weeks. To Mike, we're very grateful for that and for the time that you've extended your stay with Westwood. I've said it all along, but it really has helped make this transition go smoothly. So thank you very much. And Chris, we're happy to have you on board.
Thank you.
So, and as many people know, we've spoken about Chris a few times. He comes here from the town of Needham, where he was the assistant town manager and director of operations, and he was in Needham for 14 years. And he has cumulatively almost 25 years in Massachusetts local government. So he comes with great experience and is already working with the team, getting to know everybody, has made it through our first snowstorm. Looks like the weather gods have a lot planned for us in the next couple of weeks, and it's only the beginning. So glad to have you here, and thank you again, Mike. Other updates, let's see. Library hours. So the Islington Library, which vacated their building until it moves across the street on Washington Street, is now located in the Islington Community Center. And they are having what is called a pop-up library. So in the former sanctuary space, a library has been set up. And the hours that are now for the public to be aware of include Tuesday from 1 to 5 p.m., Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m., and Thursday 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So that's a weekly schedule. And so patrons know they should use the East Street entrance of to the building. So would that be like the former sanctuary doors, the main entrance?
Yes.
Right on the corner. So that's where you should go, even if you park around back in the parking lot or across the street or wherever appropriate parking can be found. Enter in off East Street, and this will be exclusive space in the sanctuary, and the door between the municipal office space, community space, and the Mother's Morning Out space will be locked until the end of the school day. So staff will provide and monitor public access to bathrooms during the hours of operation that MMO is there, just to keep everybody comfortable in the space. So we appreciate MMO's cooperation. We appreciate the library trustees and the library staff working out these hours, and hope that people do go to the pop-up library in Islington. And in the meantime, the main library continues with its normal operations. Briefly, I want to say that feedback we're hearing on the Westwood Weekend Stroll is great, and I want to take a moment to thank all those that helped work on the annual tree lighting ceremony. It was a great turnout. I don't know how many people were there by 4:30. I needed to leave early, but it looked like a lot of families with young children showed up, and that's exactly what we hope for.
I would venture to say it was our most busiest one ever.
Really? Did it get that busy?
It did, yes.
So that's awesome. I know Desmond worked a lot, Tish, you worked a lot on it. Anybody else that I should acknowledge?
Facilities, Jimmy McCarthy.
Oh, Jimmy McCarthy. And I know that police department was out there helping out, and Santa made it?
Santa did make it.
Santa made it. So it's great to have that event. I do want to say that hopefully we can post something on Facebook and figure out other ways and get feedback from the public through a survey, so that people can let us know their thoughts on what they would like to see again, any new ideas they may have for this weekend of events, because really it's for the community, and hopefully a lot of people will look forward to participating next year. We have an update. Something did go out last week when we did not have our meeting. I want to report to people that we have something from MassDOT, Massachusetts Department of Transportation, let us know that a section of Denham Street in Canton, which is near the bridge that crosses over I-95, is closed to vehicular traffic during overnight hours. This began last Wednesday, and it's projected to continue on weekdays, Monday through Friday, until December 20th. A detour route is in place for travelers during those hours, the overnight hours, and it's from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., so that people know. And hopefully that will remain on schedule to only go until December 20th. If there are any updates necessary, we'll provide them next Monday night at this meeting or through our communication channels, such as emails and Facebook posts. So hopefully everything will continue as planned. On to our first scheduled action item. We have a request to approve change of officers at the Norfolk Golf Club. Hi, Nora. Come on and join us.
I can do with this, yeah. As long
You're
as
all
everything's on.
This
Yes.
is a regular occurrence that they update their officers annually, and we have been provided with a request to change officers for 2020 to include the following: Stephen Marino to serve as president, Edward McNally as vice president, Michael Murphy as treasurer, and Lorraine Beaumont as secretary. And the members making up the 2020 Board of Governors include David O'Leary, Matthew Siebert, Kelly Curley, James McCool, and Todd O'Connor. Is that all correct?
That's correct, and everything is in order, and their application is in to the ABCC. Just awaiting your signature.
Terrific. And it sounds like they, from feedback I heard, had a very smooth administrative process that Karen facilitates, and they were very
They're
appreciative
always
of her
terrific.
work.
They do a great job. They're always prepared, get everything in early, so.
That's great. Okay. Any questions of Nora? Welcome,
No.
John. Glad to have you with us.
No, it's a
Okay.
great group.
It is.
People are excited for them.
Okay, I'll take a
So I
motion.
move that we grant approval to the Norfolk Golf Club 2020 change in officer applications as presented to the licensing department.
Second.
And there's no contingency. ABCC's
No.
already approved?
The
I wanna be sure.
ABCC approves upon your,
Okay, so, yep, they
Okay.
will approve. Okay.
Second.
That doesn't change the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. Thank you, Nora. And you're staying right there, because next up is their request for an annual Mother's Day brunch. I think we've probably been doing this for 10 years or more.
yes, the license ordinarily starts at noon. Every year they ask for
10.
permission to start at 10 on Mother's Day, so that they can have an early.
Which is Sunday, May 10th.
Yes.
And on a day like today, May 10th sounds like a lovely day. And no issues have ever been had with that as...
Never a problem.
Okay.
no.
So the extension of hours, as Nora said, will allow the club to open at 10 a.m. for Mother's Day brunch. And we have a letter from the club secretary, Lori Beaumont, requesting this, and no issues. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, motion?
I move that we grant approval to the Norfolk Golf Club for an extension of alcohol service to begin at 10 a.m. on Sunday, May 10th, 2020 for its annual Mother's Day brunch.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? None.
Thank you, Nora.
Okay. Sarah Bouchard, please join us. Sarah is our housing director, and she's here to share with us information so that we may consider adoption of a newly drafted housing production plan. And I know from the materials we've received, this has been a long process. We have heard about it before at this meeting. We are aware that you were recently before the planning board
correct.
and received their approval, and I believe you have a presentation. I would just say I think we're probably the abridged version,
You are the abridged version.
because I
I
think we
wanted to leave time
have,
for questions, but I
yeah,
did shorten it a bit.
yeah. So I will turn it over to you.
Great,
Thank you for being here.
I'm Sarah Bouchard. I'm the Housing and Zoning Agent. I am here with a draft of the Housing Production Plan, which was a product of the Housing Partnership, a group that is, there we go, comprised of residents who have worked really hard on this plan for over a year now. I'd like to also recognize some members that have left the board but did work on this plan, and so I just want to recognize their efforts as well as those listed here. Cheryl Fay, Jill Onderdonk, whose work on housing in the town informed our programs considerably, and Mike Gillette as well. So the work began in summer of 2018 with a goal to submit a final plan to DHCD by 2020. So here we are. Just to provide a brief summary of the big picture with respect to affordable housing. So Chapter 40B is the state's regional planning law, and it governs affordable housing, as you know. So it establishes the subsidized housing inventory, which is our list of affordable units respective to our overall housing units in town. It does some other things. It sets standards for fair housing, all the parameters for income eligibility and guidelines for these programs. It sets forth the comprehensive permit, which is the zoning mechanism by which affordable housing can be approved in a more streamlined process. And it establishes the Housing Appeals Committee, whereupon a municipality that has fallen short of its obligation on the SHI and perhaps denies a comprehensive permit, that can be appealed under the HAC, which favors the regional need for affordable housing quite considerably. It also sets forth the housing production plan. So the housing production plan is defined by Chapter 40B. It is many elements there are prescriptive, so a lot of the elements in the plan you have before you in this draft are prescriptive. The regulations are quite clear on what we need to include. It includes a market assessment, market needs for the town individually. It also considers demand for affordable housing of all types and encourages the municipality to identify some barriers to achievement of those goals. It's a strategy production document where you have to set some measurable goals for affordable housing production. It is specific to affordable housing, although our plan does touch on housing generally, as it has to really kind of zone in on the affordable housing needs. So there are varying degrees of specificity in the document you see before you, and most of that is required by 40B itself. So the path to certification, the Housing Partnership recommended a final draft to the Planning Board earlier this fall. They did receive an adoption by the Planning Board. It must be adopted by the Select Board before it can go to DHCD for approval. Housing production plans are approved for 5-year terms, and that is the approval. Once you have an approved plan, if necessary, you can seek a certification of municipal compliance, which is a safe harbor status that you may be familiar with, offered to municipalities who happen to fall below their statutory minimum criteria, in our case, 10% of our overall housing units on the subsidized housing inventory. That certification is in effect for 1 to 2 years, depending on the production goal that you meet in order to qualify for that certification. So we are right there, looking forward to submitting this to DHCD, hopefully with a vote by this board. So I just want to break down unpacking this approval versus certification, because I think this has been a point of some confusion among residents and colleagues. So just to be clear about what the difference between these two things are. So approval by DHCD for a housing production plan means it meets all of the regulatory requirements. All the basic elements of a plan are there. It's a good plan. You've done your work, pulling in the data, doing your needs assessment, reaching out to the community. That's an approval. So that's what we'll be hoping to seek by 2020. The certification of compliance is issued after you have an approved plan and if you fall below your statutory minimum. It's related to the outcome. So you have to meet a short-term housing production goal established in the plan, either 0.5 or 1% of total housing units. And so if you successfully obtain those, that certification, that gives you a safe harbor for a smaller window of time. So in our case, that 0.5% would be 27 added affordable units.
Over 5 years.
At any point. So if you add that 0.5, 6 months into having an approved plan, you can submit a request for certification at any time.
Okay.
And the idea being if you're...
If you don't meet it within the 5-year production plan, though, I guess you start over.
Right,
essentially.
yeah, so the whole plan is only an
5
approval
years.
for 5 years. So you can submit certifications for compliance within that time. We are so very close to that 10%. So just to kind of give you a sense of what this means for Westwood. We're currently at 11.1%. We've been working steadily in recent years to grow our affordable housing inventory. We've been successfully doing so. There is some uncertainty related to the 2020 census, as you know, about how that denominator is going to be calculated once all the households reporting in and when the Census Bureau determines what exactly gets included in that number. So we don't know if we'll need the safe harbor that's offered by this housing production plan. Hopefully not. Hopefully we stay above that 10%, and that safe harbor is not necessary for us to seek out. We don't know if the safe harbor protection would be applicable even to our circumstances. I expect that if we were to fall below, we would fall below by well short of that 27-unit addition. But regardless, what I do know with absolute certainty is that if we needed these safe harbor protections, we would have 0% chance of getting them if we didn't have this housing production plan approved. So this plan does have value because it covers all of our bases while we continue to hope for positive outcomes in 2020. So the plan itself, the data was consistent, the anecdotal evidence that I see in my office every day, that affordability in housing affects everybody in Westwood, right? Some of the most telling data points that I saw, and I'll just highlight some of these for you, is that many people in town are cost burdened. They're spending more than 30% of their household income towards their housing costs. And there is a significant population that's severely cost burdened, spending over 50% of their annual income in housing costs. And so what's interesting about that to me, and I know this just from the calls I receive in my office, housing affordability isn't something that just affects people who can't afford to live in Westwood. It affects people that are already living here and either can't afford to find their next location or maybe a bigger home for a growing family or downsizing their home, seeking to stay, grown children moving home. Those kinds of housing needs aren't being met when you've got such a high demand and the costs are as high as they are. The housing stock is mostly owner-occupied, single-family homes. Housing is expensive. People are having a hard time finding homes that suit their needs, and they're having difficulty entering the market. The public engagement portion of this project was significant. It's an important part of this plan. We started with a survey that was open for 3 weeks and generated over 200 responses. We did our best to try to reach as many different people, advertising in a variety of medium, offering it in paper and online with a mobile-friendly survey that could be used anywhere. And although this wasn't the goal, it was really intended to just be a way to collect data points, to collect input and information. We did find that the demographics were generally representative of the overall population, respective to household income, employment status, and whether or not respondents either rented or owned their home. So it was interesting to read the results, which the plan goes into in much greater detail than I'll summarize here. So this is consistent with the data that the census was reporting on cost burden. A third of the respondents on the survey were concerned about their household's ability to maintain their current housing, with affordability a leading cause. People were also concerned about their ability to locate their next housing, wherever that may be, although we did see lots of people indicating interest in staying in Westwood. There were also some housing stability concerns that were reflected here. Ability to pay for maintenance, improvements to their homes, or ability to live independently, kind of modifying their homes to suit their needs as time goes on. So these are the strongest responses towards the types of housing production that respondents on the survey wish to see. The overarching theme we saw in both the survey and the other community engagement piece in the visioning workshop, respondents really felt that there was not enough of this so-called starter home housing in Westwood, kind of really gravitating towards that modestly sized entry-level home that could serve a more versatile set of residents in their housing needs. There was a strong push towards, being interested in more senior housing, and then significant groups that were looking for more flexible and creative housing options that they'd like to see more of in Westwood, be it affordable housing, duplexes, or condos and apartments. The community visioning session was the second kind of big piece of community engagement that we conducted. Last fall, we had a in-person workshop where we really invited residents to roll up their sleeves and roundtable and really kind of work creatively together to discuss Westwood's housing needs and think about possible solutions. So it was a workshop format. They talked about what their perfect world, where they'd love to see Westwood in so many years, kind of what the obstacles were to achieving that perfect world, talking about strategies respective to zoning changes that could be made or mapping out specific locations for some of their ideas. And all of the materials from this visioning session are included as exhibits in the housing production plan. It was a really engaging evening. I really enjoyed it a lot. People were very creative and thoughtful. There was a lot of fantastic feedback that night. But generally speaking, nothing you all don't already know. Residents really value the schools. They love the location of this community. They love the sense of community. They love living here for all of those reasons. They were concerned about affordability and the abilities of themselves and perhaps their families to continue to live in Westwood. They were concerned about threats to intergenerational living. Can my kids afford to move back to this town where I raised them, or can I afford to have mom and dad move here with me? They were concerned about tear downs, going back to that argument about the kind of the starter home activity, wanting to see their neighborhoods preserved. Great priority on preservation of that green and open space, loving the open feel that they have here with respect to conservation areas. That's a really big distinctive part about Westwood. So how do we preserve that while also encouraging housing growth? And really hoping to preserve an inclusive community feel and expanding housing choices. So the Housing Partnership, kind of looking at all of that data, both in the needs assessment and then through all of the community input that we received, kind of formalized into an action plan that has a series of goals and then action items that are tied to each of the goals. So I didn't put them all in here because I know you have your plan in front of you. So these goals really are pretty varied. Some of them, like I said, are far more specific than others. You're talking about serving different demographics, so we're really looking at first-time and low to moderate income home buyers. What are the kinds of opportunities that we can develop for them in either the existing housing stock or creating new opportunities? Supportive housing for people with disabilities was a need that was really generated by the community feedback that we received. Expressing that as an interest in the community. Housing stability initiatives for seniors. How do we allow seniors to stay housed in this community, either in their current homes or in other housing situations that might suit their needs? Encouraging affordable rental and ownership units for seniors. And that's a response to changing demographics. We're seeing that Westwood is getting older. At a rate that's outpacing other, just statewide. Mm-hmm. So how do we develop housing units that meet that changing need? Encouraging housing development that protects open space and conservation land, so kind of balancing those two competing interests in ways that work for everyone. Fair housing, making sure that affordable units are distributed equitably throughout town in fairly marketed ways. The Housing Partnership felt strongly that we should strive to exceed our SHI minimum, and they set 1% as a goal to stay above that 10% as a safeguard and also as a vision that they felt really strongly about meeting that community need. Pursuing initiatives that support regional needs, that's a DHCD request. That's one of those things that they look to see that we will do is support kind of regional planning and development ideas.
Anything specific on that?
No. So we identified a couple of coalitions that we were looking for, and then also much of the goals and the action items in here are best practices that are consistent with a lot of the regional housing plans that you see. And I think they're looking to see that kind of collaborative momentum among communities to result in something that's kind of bigger than the sum of any of these municipalities independently. And then preserving and expanding our existing portfolio of affordable housing. So the implementation items are loosely organized by goal. It's really a toolbox of possible ideas and solutions. You'll see that some of the action items are more invitations for further study and review. They're not mandates. There's a lot of study items in there, particularly with respect to big zoning changes. You know that zoning changes have many steps, multiple hearings and lots of input from the public. Careful study and review as to whether or not that's even something that's appropriate for the town. So some of the items in this action plan, are more study items. We'll commit to looking at this and seeing whether this might be an appropriate tool for the town to utilize going forward. But others are specific measurable actions that are really designed to result in hard units added to the SHI. Identification of specific parcels, for example, or, more targeted tweaks to a zoning bylaw that we should consider. So they're all set to advance over a 5-year timeline with kind of staggered identifications for starts. But it's a toolbox to kind of pick and choose the ideas that work best for the community. So that is a hopefully brief summary of the housing production plan. I'm here requesting that this board formally adopt the housing production plan. That adoption is the language that's used by DHCD in the regulations. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
I'll start with a few, and I'm sure my colleagues have some. In terms of the timing to receive the denominator, the updated calculation, the 2020 census, can you give us best guess as to when that becomes known to us?
Sure. So Census Day is April 1st, correct, Nora? Yeah, so that's the day where the count is actually considered for that denominator, but we don't expect to receive figures from the census until later in the year. What I've read
So we're in
is
this
much later in the fall.
in-between period of not knowing what our current number changes to, 11.1%.
Right.
Just so you know, and hopefully you already heard, but last week when Pam and Chris and I were attending the Finance Commission meeting, there was some confusion, I hope we clarified to a certain degree, over some people thinking we were already good for 10% after January 1, and we said, no, we aren't sure. And
Right.
we aren't sure. But they had several questions, so we did our best to answer them. I think at some point they may request your attendance at a meeting, but we'll see if
Yeah, I'd be
we
happy
can
to
handle
talk
it
to her.
separately or whatever.
that's
But
fine.
I just want to say, having read it and heard a lot about it, I think you and all the people who worked on it have done an amazing job to fulfill what is expected for this plan. Questions, John?
No, I would just say, a lot of thought went into it. I agree. I think the sessions were great. It's an aspirational document. We may not get to where we want to be, but it does lay out some important goals. We have seen articles at town meeting trying to restrict tear downs and things like that, and they're met with vociferous opposition. So, we know that, but there are other action items that we're trying to take. And I think, too, what is confusing to people is that the definition of residence has changed over the years. And so I'm often asked, well, isn't it just a simple math problem? But it's really not,
No.
right? So what was defined as a residence 20 years ago or even 15 years ago has changed. So we are confident that we're safe, but until we know the final number, it's important to keep moving with this plan.
Right, and development isn't static. There are new units coming online all the time.
Right.
We have a lot of irons in the fire with respect to affordable housing and housing generally, but some of those projects move forward, some of them don't. It's always, even that part is a moving target as well. So we're kind of throwing everything at the wall. And like you said, we're hoping that we have that confidence we'll stay above 10%, but we have a good plan to get above it if we do fall below, and that denominator is
It's
adjusted.
good to have this plan regardless.
And I think the other thing, too, that people are often surprised, we were at 13%.
Mm-hmm.
So, an aspiration of 11 is still short of where we once were.
Right.
So Sarah, do we know, I mean, we obviously do a town census every year because Dottie calls if you don't return it, and sometimes the police come to collect it, but that's another story for another time.
Not unless you
I'm just
mail it right
wondering,
away.
How far, you know, the last couple of times, how far has our town census actually been in compared to the federal census? Do we know? Have we ever really compared that, Mike? Maybe you know? You know? I'm just wondering, that might give us some idea before the federal census comes out as to how relatively close, you know,
But I think
Dottie
the
is.
fact that what is defined as a residence has evolved and changed, even that
Yeah,
comparison
right.
might not be
No, but at least they
something
give
we
us a
can.
ballpark, you know.
Yeah, I think we
Whether or not
probably
we're
have
at
the best
11 or
ballpark
we're
in our
at
own guessing.
10.1.
I think the biggest question that we're looking at is assisted care and memory care
Right.
type units.
Right.
And
That'll
Sarah,
be the
remind me again,
biggest.
Bridges.
the in-law apartments that are attached to a house, each counts as a unit of housing.
That's another moving
Oh, okay.
part,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
knew there was,
there
I
you
knew there
go.
was a question
Yeah,
somewhere.
so
there.
There- another
that's a moving
example.
part.
That's another example,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, those are all single-family homes. We assess them as single-family homes. They receive special permits from the zoning board where they meet fairly strict design requirements that they maintain the appearance and the feel of single-family homes. And I would say probably, knowing, again, anecdotally, a lot of residents who have accessory apartments in their homes, they're occupied by family, and they would probably consider themselves one household.
Right. But it's a question.
But yeah, right, exactly, and they're not obligated to be occupied by family.
All the more reason to
so,
do this.
Yeah, we just don't know.
How many communities in the Commonwealth have created these housing production plans? Do you have any sense?
I believe it's somewhere around half, but don't quote me on that. I feel like I've read.
It's a lot of
hundreds.
work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And the one other comment I wanted to make is that out of these action plans, we may find the need, once we utilize the $1 million that was approved at the 2018 town meeting, we may see other financial needs going forward to support objectives that we put forth. And I know we're going to have opportunities soon to start considering how to utilize the $1 million that we did have approved. So
My hope is that this plan can be a roadmap for all of us on boards and as town staff when we see development opportunities and we say, does this fit the town's needs? My hope is that this document can be a reference point for us to say, well, the data shows that this type of affordable housing is a value add to our community.
Yeah.
So even without those safe harbor protections, this is a really useful, I hope, planning document for us going forward.
So Sarah, is this the first one we've ever done? The first housing production plan in Westwood?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
big undertaking.
They did
And
a
I
good-
think-
good job inventing the wheel.
But it's, I think, Michael, the issue of the census, I think what's important is that we're ahead of this. We're ahead of the final numbers from the census. So we're not reacting
So
to
important.
Yep.
unfriendly.
Any other questions, public? No?
So I move that we adopt the housing production plan as presented and authorize the housing director to submit a formal application to the Department of Housing and Community Development for its approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nobody opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you
Thank you,
did,
Sarah.
Sarah. It's a lot of work.
Great
Thank
job.
you, Sarah.
Moving right along, we're going to get another budget update and talk about some capital projects. Hello, Pam Duke.
Hello.
It's good to see you here again,
Hello, entire finance department.
and the
Yes, we
team.
have
The
the
team
team
is
here
here.
tonight.
Team is here.
This is going to be part of ongoing discussions. I'm just going to turn it over to you, and you can walk us through what you would like to present tonight, and I know we'll have some discussion of some capital.
Yes, so we continue to work through the budget. I'm just going to do an overview of where we are with the overall budget, and then a quick overview of the capital budget, and then we do have Nicole Banks, the Recreation Director, to talk about some specific capital projects that Recreation is putting forth for FY21.
Okay?
So just a reminder, you've been working at the budget since October and November meetings, doing a lot of different pieces of the budget. We're continuing that in your December meetings, looking at capital budget items, the overall budget. We'll start to look at the municipal operating budget, and we'll continue that in your January meetings. We're targeting that February 1 date where we produce the initial proposed budget for FY21. And just a reminder, the goals when we look at the budget are to hit the many areas including sustainable operating budgets for school and municipal, continue the high level of capital investment that's been done the last couple of years, continue working on compliance with our reserves and long-term liabilities, talking about incorporating larger capital items that have been on the horizon, and continue efforts with the tax bill to try to limit the growth of the tax bill. So as we look at the overall FY21 budget, we start with our revenue slide. This is current revenue, just over $102 million. We look first, we have a balanced budget today. What would be our expected projections for FY21? And because most of our revenue comes from taxes, we do have to look at what our tax projections are through Prop 2.5. And that's the slide here. It's a very specific formula on what we can expect for projected increases in taxes for the next fiscal year. Just looking at that rightmost column first, Prop 2.5, the formula takes us directly from the prior year, lets us increase by 2.5%, and then we have some estimates of new growth. We're currently estimating about $450,000 for general new growth and $200,000 in FY21 from University Station growth. We continue down with the formula, the shaded bar in the middle, the exempt debt, $1.2 million. That's the debt specifically that's been raised outside of Prop 2.5, and for us, that's the high school and library projects. So our maximum taxing capacity for FY21, $83.5 million. Just want to look on the last line, the excess levy, taxes not raised. So each year on the chart, you see there's the capacity of what we could raise, then the line, what we actually raise, and then there's a delta, excess levy. And we're explaining that excess levy in the bottom graph. So in FY20, this has now been updated for our final levy and new growth approved by the Department of Revenue and approved after you voted the tax shift. We got our tax rate certified, so we know our actual numbers now for the current year, FY20. So in FY20, we had excess levy of just over $800,000. And if you look at the bottom, we're explaining that's in two pieces. One, $378,000 of University Station new growth, higher than what we had been carrying in the budget. And then the second piece, $422,000 of excess levy from other new growth higher than budget or other reasons. And you can see for the last couple of years, we have had excess levy in each of the years. Excess levy is a good thing. It means we could have charged $800,000 more in taxes to our residents, and we did not. It gives us some capacity in the future. The rating agencies like to see excess levy. Again, it gives you some flexibility for future. So when we do our calculations for the 21 budget, we can pick up that excess levy from the prior year, and we do so except for the University Station. So since FY15, when the University Station project has come online, we do not automatically use that new growth. We make that a very public decision by the select board during the budget discussions. So for FY21, we're using the maximum capacity under Prop 2.5, except for $578,000, which is right now the unused levy from University Station. So $378,000 from the current year, and then expected new growth of $200,000 for FY21. So that's on a budget basis. We would start the budget under those conditions. And again, we always just want to point out when we look at the levy, the town has had no general override since 2007. And certainly the University Station revenue has been a part of that. That exempt debt line declines every year as our debt is paid off, and the high school bond has 3 years left before that's completed. So when we move along and look at the revenue for FY21, it's really all coming from the taxes. Our projected growth, $2.86 million. Again, coming from the 2.5%, the estimate of new growth, the pickup of the unused levy from the year before, again, except for the University Station. Early in the budget year, we level fund state aid. at what the current rate is. We won't know further on that until the governor's budget comes out at the end of January. We level fund our local receipts projections, and we would plan to use free cash in a similar basis that we have in the current year, which right now is $2.4 million for our base capital, $125,000 for stabilization account, and then some additional amount for capital beyond the base. So really, we have about $2.86 million to work with as we consider the FY21 budget. That number is very consistent when we do 5-year forecast, and it's really a very consistent number under Prop 2.5 for us. On the expense side, we first look at what do we need for fixed cost, and you've previously looked at this slide. We currently spend about $13.8 million on our employee benefit costs and $1.4 million in our insurance and reserve accounts. When we look at what our projections are for the increases of those costs in FY21, we right now are projecting a $920,000 or 6.3% increase in that fixed cost budget. That includes an expected pension assessment increase of 7%, currently an estimate of our health insurance increase of 5%, and then other fixed costs, smaller increases, in total about $200,000, and a $25,000 increase to our OPEB appropriation per our funding schedule. So $920,000 that we need to provide for first. And again, we don't really have an update on the health insurance until later in the budget process, February, March. When we look at the rest of the budget on the expense side, our largest area is the operating budget. Almost 70% of the budget is spent for the annual school and municipal budget, providing services to the community. Each 1% increase in that budget cost about $687,000, with about $465,000 on the school side, $222,000 on municipal. So we showed a couple of tables at the bottom. About a 3% increase is just over $2 million. So when we look at our initial projections overall for the budget for FY21, we know we have an increase in revenue of about $2.86 million. That fixed cost budget, as we mentioned, about $920,000. That gives us a net available revenue for everything else, about $1.94 million. And that lines up, as it does each and every year, just about the 2.5% to 3% for our operating budget. So really, we can fund about a 3% increase to school and municipal within our normal conditions from Prop 2.5. Again, this is very consistent every year, and if we forecast this out for several years, we're just about this number. This is really the constraints of Prop 2.5. So we look at our preliminary budget for the operating budget would be to try to stay within that 3% range. And we have been in that range for actual budgets over the last couple of years for school and municipal. In FY16 and 17, we did provide budget growth beyond that 3%. We did use additional university station funding in order for that to happen. On the capital budget, as we've looked at before, we would be able to maintain the current level of our base capital, $2.3 million for school and municipal. And then we would be able to supplement that additional capital as the board has done the last few years. So since FY17, we've been supplementing our base capital, trying to make up for the years that we were not at a target for our base capital. In the current year, FY20, we did $2.3 million in additional capital. Right now, you're going through the process of determining what that might be for the FY21 budget. And we supplement the additional capital with free cash, meals and hotel tax, and we could continue to do that in FY21. So the other items we'll be working through over the next month or so. Again, that base budget we looked at does not include the unused university station revenue, $578,000, which comes again in those two pieces, what we didn't use in the current budget and the estimated growth for 21. We've not yet adjusted state aid. There has been discussion on increase in Chapter 70. We know that will not be a significant amount for Westwood, but there will be some increase in Chapter 70. We do have the meals and hotel tax available to help with additional capital budget items as been done the last couple of years. And as we work through the budget, we'll look at options on trying to limit the tax bill increase, including, again, as we've done the last couple of years, not utilizing that full levy, having excess levy. So at this point in the budget, would be trying to meet your general goals, maintaining moderate and sustainable operating budget growth for school and municipal in about that 3% range, continuing the high level of capital investment with our base capital, doing a supplement to capital, as has been done the last couple of years. Right now, we're considering that road improvement bond that you looked at your last meeting. We would be able to fund that with a long-term bond, and that debt could come online and replace debt that's dropping off from a previous DPW bond, and would be able to continue the progress on the liability and reserve accounts. $125,000 transfer to our stabilization fund and $1.46 million appropriation to our OPEB trust fund. So we'll continue along kind of revising and updating through your December and January meetings, finding out more information again about state aid, the operating budgets, reviewing again capital items, looking to put that all together as we get towards the February 1 date. We do go to FinCom on February 11th to present the budget that's proposed at that point.
I know you spent considerable time last week before Finance Commission going through all this. We won't have it be a 2-hour presentation tonight, so that was great. I like that.
Yes. We did with the Finance Commission, they did have some new members.
Yeah.
And they happened to not have other items on that meeting. So it was a good slot to take some time and really go through the material. They had a lot of, great questions back and forth. It was a real working session. So it's helpful for them to have that background before we kind of go in with the budgets. Just
Okay.
quickly moving on now to the capital. Again, you've been reviewing capital the last couple of meetings and will continue to do so. The capital budget, we had produced that 5-year document that we do each year that looks at the needs for the next 5 years. That is online on the town's website, and we have issued that to the Finance and Warrant Commission. We talk about capital budget in really 3 categories. Our regular, ongoing, recurring capital. We're showing that spending in the bar graph on the bottom. Again, $2.3 million in the current year. That's for school and municipal, ongoing vehicle replacement for police and fire, school and municipal IT, school and municipal building maintenance. So we have those similar items this year. They'll fall into the similar range that we've done in the current year for spending. We then, different years, have non-recurring projects, such as turf fields or road bonds or larger recreation projects. And those are the items that we're having departments come into you this year and go through those projects. And then the town always has kind of larger new buildings or renovation projects that are considered over different periods.
I understand, just as I digress for a moment, but the school building committee is asked to come in and make a presentation to us sometime in January. So I think we'll be hearing about that large
Great.
building project.
So as you're continuing your review to look at some of the, what we're calling the non-recurring projects, last meeting you had the DPW director come in and go through the road bond and turf field project. We also had Chief Deckers come in and talk about an item in the fire department, a large piece of equipment. And tonight you'll hear from the Recreation Director, Nicole Banks, talking about several different projects coming from the recreation, a few of these that have been talked about last spring in the budget process and continued forward.
I think that's your cue, Nicole. Come on up and
I'm
join
just going to
us.
finish one item and
Okay.
then.
Oh,
I'm gonna-
sorry.
Sorry.
She paused. I thought
Sorry.
you were there.
I shouldn't have. I just, we just wanted to
Oh, okay, you wanna do that
remind
first.
folks that the town has done, many large building projects or large renovation projects over the years, and we will continue to need to do that going forward. It's important that we have kind of a steady, ongoing reinvestment in our capital buildings. This is where we're providing services to the community through the school department, the library, the police building. Sometimes the timing of which project comes up can depend on the immediate need in any building or for a department to provide service. It can depend on the financing available. It can depend on outside funding, like the MSBA state school funding or a grant, such as we got with the library. We just want to take a quick look back. We've done many buildings in the past. It's been a while since we had a new school building, so people may not remember. We had a period of very heavy school investment. About 19, 20 years ago, we did several school buildings at once. We did a large renovation and expansion to the Martha Jones School, $7.2 million. At the same time, we had a large renovation and expansion to the Downey School, $6.5 million. And then we built our new high school, which still feels like a new high school, just over $44 million. All of those happened at once. It was a very heavy period of investment in school buildings by the community. All of those projects worked with the state MSBA program, the program in place at that time. We did receive 59% funding from the state for those projects. That's not what we'll receive now for new projects, but certainly it was beneficial for the town to participate. And as people will recall, one of the reasons that the projects were all done at once is that there was the knowledge that the prior MSBA program was ending. They had a moratorium in place before beginning kind of the new version of the MSBA, and the town was able to take advantage and kind of get in and get the 59% funding out of the old program. So it was a lot at once, but it was very beneficial for the town to do so. All of those projects were funded as long-term bonds and voted as debt exemptions, meaning that debt could be raised outside of Prop 2.5. The one other school building we had about 10 years ago was some of the expansion and modular units at the middle school, $3.5 million. That's funded with a long-term bond within 2.5.
Pam, were those the modulars that face on High Street near the Fisher School? That was the older one, and then we more recently did the add-on in the back.
The field, yeah.
So we actually have done two sets of things.
We have done two sets, and which one, that one?
That's the one on the field.
On the back is the newer one?
My kids
already
are in the-
10
My kids are in the
years?
middle school. that one
Okay,
has-
so then the other ones were close to the other building projects.
At that same time. it
Yeah,
must
the
have been.
front ones.
Yep.
It's already 10 years
Yes,
since those were put on?
Yes,
Yep.
they are.
So I think it's just, it's been a
Right, 'cause my
while
daughter was
since the
already
community's done a school building, but we have done many of them. We would fund them as a long-term bond. We would participate in any state funding that's available, and that is currently going on now with the schools. Just quickly to look back on some of the town buildings, the library, the brand-new library done in 2010, about a $13 million project. We got a state grant, $4 million towards that, and then the town funded its share of the project, $9 million, with a long-term bond voted outside the limits of 2.5. So that,
20-year bond,
a 20-year bond. I think that ends in
2030.
2031. But that was a project where it had been, the building was in need. People had talked about a new building, but when the state grant came, we needed to move at that point to participate in that project. The Islington Fire Station, the new station, 2015, $8.6 million, funded with the long-term debt. That project, with the expansion of University Station and the increase in staffing and fire, that project needed to go forward to accommodate that and accommodate the equipment and staffing needed to service University Station. And then the police headquarters, 2016, $13 million, funded with long-term debt. So those are what we've kind of done over the past, and going forward. As I said, there'll always be new needs. We'll always be continuing to update buildings. What's in progress right now is the school project, looking at the Hanlon, Deerfield, and Sheehan. They are looking to work with MSBA funding for components of that. Future projects that are in the 5-year plan, just to kind of lay out that at some point we would need to address these facilities. Town hall renovation, senior center expansion, Fire Station 1, DPW facility or combination with sewer facility, and a recreation and community center. So those needs are out there, and again, there'll always be projects to work on, but the town has, in the past, very methodically kind of worked through various buildings. We'll kind of get to everything, not all at once, but kind of work through each project as it comes forward. So that's where we are with capital, and again, you're continuing your review of kind of some non-recurring items, and then we'll start to put together what your proposal would be for capital, and then identify the funding sources for what would go forward in FY21.
Terrific.
And
Now, Nicole, please come up. When I was looking at it, I thought this was going to follow yours, so I'm sorry.
thank you.
But please join us.
Presentation, so
No.
happy to stick to the fun
So
stuff.
welcome.
Thank you.
Nicole is here representing the Recreation Department, and we look forward to hearing what is on your plate now and what is being looked at.
Great. Well, I thank you for the time. This has been sort of an annual tradition here where I come forward with some of the projects that we've been discussing with the community. We have a very thorough process with our Recreation Commission to review these, and over the past couple of years have also gone through an open space and recreation plan update, which has included some of these projects in here, as well as now the comprehensive master plan. So it has been a busy time for capital projects, but we are very happy to have the support that we've had so far, and we're happy to be able to continue to bring these projects forward that we've heard and seen an input and interest in. So I just want to start off by highlighting the photo on the front. This is what we were all talking about last year at this time, was the new lighting at the high school tennis courts. This picture was taken at the end of October, and you can't really see it perfectly with the windscreens, but all the courts were in use. End of October, I think it was about 7:30 p.m., and we had all 6 courts in use. So definitely saw the value in having this project for the community. We also started a pilot program for an adult tennis league, and we had about 20 participants in that pilot program this fall. We utilized about 325 hours of light usage for the first season. So really great to get to just come back and kind of show some of that value there for the community. The next slide, I suppose I'll use this. Excellent. Community support, really, just highlighting some of the projects that we've been through over the last several years. We've been really doing a lot of work on our recreation facilities, our main facility being our indoor pool, and we've had some great projects that have been completed there. Also the athletic surfaces, the tennis and basketball courts that are our outdoor courts, and the playgrounds have all seen many improvements in this, and I really want to recognize all of the departments and volunteers who work with us to get that done. I especially would like to mention Tom, who has gotten many of our projects done in the pool facility on energy efficiency with no cost to our department or to the town. And that's been great because we've actually seen a reduction in our operating costs, and you don't always get to have that outcome. So that's been great to have. And also with our playgrounds, I think these were really important projects because we had great community partners who helped us do the fundraising for those. So we worked with the Lions Club, Westwood Young Women's Club, and the Pheasant Hill Neighborhood Group for those. So all really great projects, and we appreciate the support. So the first project that I'm bringing forward tonight is the Thurston field lights. And if you'll recall, we were here last year reviewing this project, and we actually had a project of actually lighting the fields and going forward with requesting last year to have the field lights put in. We were taking a look at the last couple of years having a significant field shortage, especially for our multi-purpose fields. And we were also knew that we were going to be coming into a construction period for the Westwood Lodge. And so as we were trying to prepare for that, we were putting forward the Thurston fields as an option to have lighting added. At that time last year, we all decided and gathered the support to have a design study done, and that's what we've been working on since those funds were released to us. And we will have the full study of a designed light solution for the 2 fields at Thurston. So a couple of things to go over here is that we have met with the athletics department and the youth sports groups and have the support from those groups. We have been, had some questions come up about why lighting at this site. As I mentioned, we do get 2 multi-purpose fields lighted at this site. It's one of the few sites that we have that doesn't have close proximity of residential neighbors, so that's an important feature of this selection of a site. And we also have the school use portion of this, and so the athletic director would be interested in having evening games and matches for some of the high school, probably JV games there. The other thing that has come up is are lights needed? And so we've had a lot of discussions about that evening field time availability. As I mentioned in the open space and recreation plan and also through the feedback from many of our groups, we have had a couple of things come up, both that there's a shortage in field space, that we don't have enough multi-purpose field space, but also that the evening playtime is an important playtime. When the coaches are available, when the players and kids are available to come out and play. So that's why the evening playtime is an important piece of
I'll
this.
just share with you, my daughter's practice time was 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it was great watching the girls play soccer in the dark.
Yes, yeah.
It's exciting.
It's
the other thing,
tough.
Nicole, that I would add to this, though, is there's been this history of these temporary lights,
Yeah.
which are both, I think they're a safety hazard.
Yeah, they are. So 2 years ago, we did review putting temporary lights at Thurston, and the fire department was great. They came, they reviewed it. We worked with youth soccer mostly, but it could have been a few of the athletic groups to see if that would be an option for us. But really what had to take place is there had to be fuel storage and a plan for the fuel use. That was just something that the youth sport groups didn't feel like as volunteer organizations they could take on, and understandably that was a significant
people didn't want their children inhaling
liability
the fumes.
to take on. They're loud, they're noisy,
smell.
They smell.
Is it like
they're
a
not-
generator driven?
they're very noisy, and they weren't the right solution. But that was really kind of the first steps into having this conversation about lighting. And so we know that those weeknights are really where that need is. And I have put forward, additional availability because we have 2 fields. You'd be looking at, the total that you could get if they were run all the time would be 800 hours per field.
And I think the other piece that's come up is this notion that maybe when the school building project is done, we'd have lights at a new Sheehan or a new Hanlon. I mean, I think we have to all be honest. We're not going to be putting lights on Pond Street or Gay Street.
And I think we've been searching over the past 2 years for this perfect solution, and really lighting is very limited. We just went through a planning board lighting review with the tennis courts, and it was a discussion that took several rounds of going through that, collecting data, light engineer reports, all of that. To get to the point of feeling comfortable with putting additional lighting. And that was at a site at the high school where we already had athletic lighting, parking lot lighting. So you can see a lot of our field spaces that we would have. Deerfield has been mentioned. The neighbors are very close proximity to that field. You really don't have the buffer zone. Many of our fields, which are on the school properties, that's the layout that we have. The other item that I'm going to talk about tonight is the First Parish land.
Can we, before you jump to
Yep.
that, when will we have this study? Because this slide indicates it was due last week.
Yes, it was due last week. I have updated that. I'm putting in the new estimate at the beginning of January, but I do hope to have it sooner than that. They are reviewing, they just got the electrical specifications, the schematic diagrams to connect the electricity in, and the light diagrams are coming back from the light company, Musco, so we'll have all of that together. So basically what you'll see here is if we looked last year at the tennis court lights, you'll have a very similar layout. So you'll have the map showing where the light poles will be. We do have a preliminary design of those, but we went back and asked for some changes due to the exact layout of our fields. It's a pretty tight footprint at Thurston, and we're close to a wetlands buffer, and so we've moved around a little bit to kind of meet what we needed.
And it
for
will
the
address the
conservation
presence of
limits.
the gas line.
Yes, it will address the gas line. They've looked into that. They've done all the test pit borings, so we'll know what the soils are. These are higher light poles, so the footings are gonna be quite a bit larger than what we saw. So they did quite an
And will
extensive review
you,
of
when that comes in, will you have a sense or get from DPW what the annual budget would be to maintain
Yes,
the
we
fields
will
with
include that
more
point.
intense
I've
use?
talked to Brendan preliminary regarding that, and the discussions have also included What we'd like to have the repairs be able to support some sod repairs, because one of the concerns is that the grass fields, if we have additional use where we're opening them up at night, how are we going to repair and take care of that grass turf? And again, when I get into talking about the First Parish land, there's a couple of things, a couple of thoughts here. So Thurston becomes your evening play space where you're utilizing that on your weeknights. If we develop an additional multi-purpose field at the First Parish land, or maybe in conjunction with the new school site, when that gets developed, trying to move some of the daytime use. So Saturday, basically the groups are all playing their games on Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., shift those daytime uses to the First Parish land or another
you
multi-purpose field to take
Back
it
off
off
the
there.
use of the Thurston where the lights are to use it at night. Is that what
Exactly,
you're
so that you
implying?
can balance that through the schedules that
Okay.
we would put together.
That wasn't clear before,
The
thank
other
you.
thing that has been important, and we've been asked to make sure, is that we have the ability to add artificial turf in the future. And so the Thurston would be able to, the lights will be designed in a way that we could come back in future years and add that, if that's an
Yeah,
alternate
will anybody be
option.
able to talk to that? Has it been done before where lights go in, precede
Yes,
turf?
it has been done
So-
before,
Okay, good.
and we will be getting from the engineers that, the statement that that will be able to be done. Now, there's, if you know the Thurston Fields, there's an elevation change between the
Right.
two.
I know.
So, we can have a cost of what would a typical, turf installation be for two fields that size. But, we might not know exactly like how much fill would be needed and things like that. But we will absolutely know that we can do that installation in the future if that's what we decide.
I think that's one of the prevailing
Versus-
questions, which should come first.
Yeah, and
Well, I don't-
versus
it-
building
even-
another grass field.
Or even if we should do
you know.
turf. I mean, for a town our size, these things are very expensive and they don't last long.
And then you have the replacement
So I don't know
cost
if there's
of it,
universal
right.
agreement that that should be turfed.
Right, so I know soccer has pushed pretty hard for artificial turf, even since last year when we met. They're interested in trying to talk about a fundraiser. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's gonna be
yeah.
something,
I think
but
John's-
I think the point is
it's
that we
expensive.
will
That's a whole
have
other discussion. though.
options, so that
A
that
lot
would
of
be an
this is-
option in the future
Yeah, no, I
and
get
and
it.
getting those costs.
No, I get it, and
the
that's-
other option would be developing another grass
Yeah.
turf field.
And that's kind of a segue when we get to the turf field behind the high school. I think some of this is just trying to ensure we're sequencing it right. But I think with the Thurston lights, if they're laid out in a way that the discussion around turf can be done later, it provides some immediate relief.
It does, and it provides the relief that we we kind of knew last year that we were gonna be in this crunch. So we have
Yeah.
found out that we're not gonna have the lodge this spring. We are gonna be asking all of the groups to cut back their use. We're just not gonna have as many hours available. I'm foreseeing the same thing will happen when we go through the school construction project, because whichever site gets selected will have fields go down. So we really wanna try to get a little bit ahead of the curve and really just be able to meet what our
Right.
overextended use is currently. When you have a field go down or you rest a field, which we don't really do here, but, one day if we have enough, if we do an additional multipurpose field, and I'm also trying to talk to the school committee to say, as you look at the new building, if there's an additional cost to get a full-size multipurpose field at the new elementary school, have a look at that, see what that cost difference is, because that might be worthwhile
This
to also have.
is part of a
Yeah,
bigger
it's-
picture. So why don't we move along
But
to
I-
the parish land?
But I just want to say one thing. I do think there's a bigger discussion, because there may even be a parcel with no building.
Yeah,
Right,
I
when we
mean,
talk- so-
there's a lot of moving parts in
A lot of moving
what's
parts,
going on here.
but I
It's
don't-
going to need a
Absolutely.
comprehensive
Yeah.
review.
But I agree that it needs comprehensive, but I don't want this Thurston Field Lighting project to get caught up in a comprehensive review.
Right,
We
and
could-
so
we could
what
get
we're
some
gonna try to
immediate
show
relief.
is exactly what that design option is, what the cost is gonna be,
Right.
and then that future phasing can be done. Right?
Correct.
And that this doesn't all have to be done at the same time. And that goes for the parish land as well. I'm tying them together as an option for alleviating some of the overuse of
Okay,
grass.
so why don't we
turf.
go on to the parish land?
Okay, so the parish land, this slide just shows you what the property lines look like of that land that was purchased several years back. It's abutting the softball field and the tennis courts at the high school, and it's approximately 5 acres. So for the parish land development, we are proceeding with a study that will take a look at putting together for us what the options are and the costs associated with the 3 proposed uses. So the first use would be a multi-purpose field. and there is plenty of space for a full 11v11 field. The second use would be switching out the baseball field. So the high school baseball field would be repositioned on the First Parish land, and the multipurpose field would be built where the baseball field currently sits. And the third option is a field house to see what that 5 acres could support for an indoor space. And that would include the parking and access and everything that would need to be provided with that, just so we can have a general idea of what that indoor space would be like. You know, one of the things that comes up all the time is basketball space and an indoor gym. So those 3 options will have an outline. We will have, for the field options, we will have a layout, we will have costs. For the field house, we will have sort of a bullet list of what could fit inside of that, and also details like how much parking would be required and those types of things. The property is large enough in all of those scenarios that it would include additional parking, and we would also look to attach it to the high school as far as having that parking there as well with some type of a pathway.
So Nicole, that's, that was my, and obviously I would love to see us redo the multi-purpose field behind the high school and the lights. I just don't see us doing it at the same time. But it does feel to me the parish land, that whole right side, if you're looking at the school, the parish land and some of the space along the parking lot, and then the multi-purpose field, it's very disjointed right now. There's storage trailers, there's snowplow equipment, there's some wide open swaths of sand and some grass. So my only concern with doing the multi-purpose field now in the immediate was that just whole swath just needs to be looked at. And I know later on you have talk of expanding that storage garage. Is that the one that I'm thinking of?
Yes.
To the left of?
Yeah,
it just
so the
seems like
area where you're
Maybe
talking
not so
about,
much yet.
right?
That's what I'm just saying. Like when we talk about, I think that needs a master plan because it.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're going to do. So I can say, you know, all of these options that we're going to get costs on in this study would not need to impact the multipurpose field. So we wouldn't be
Okay.
taking any of that space. So I think the space that we would have left over is sort of where the sand volleyball pit is. So could something be done there? And if you went with the multipurpose field there, you'd have a little bit more room. So I guess I would envision something similar to what the multipurpose has with then a side field, the practice 7v7 field. You might
Yeah,
get more
you know,
Okay, we digress, but I think we can't do a comprehensive discussion
Yep.
if you want to make another point, but we need to sort of
Yeah, okay.
move this along
Yep,
to.
but we could certainly take the time and take
Yeah,
what we have
because
in these studies and
There is a
build on
lot
them as
going
well.
on in recreation, and that's all good. If we need to revisit it as a,
Okay, so I think just to
Right,
wrap up
I
the
guess my point
parish
was,
land.
I don't want to send everything off to like a death study, right? There are some tactical immediate things we could do.
Absolutely, and these have really been put together in a way that we could move forward with them in stages, and this will really give us what our options are, and we can take the next year to kind of work through those. So the next slide is for pickleball, and you know that the Sheehan tennis courts need to be repurposed. They are no longer in use for any type of recreation activity. And so one of the options that came out of our studies that we did in community meetings with looking at all of our athletic courts was that Westwood would really like pickleball. Pickleball is still the #1 thing I get phone calls
I
on.
know.
I need.
Fastest growing sport among adults.
It was in Sports Illustrated not that long ago.
It's a great
hysterical.
sport. It transcends all ages. It would really serve the senior population, which we don't serve with, as many active recreation opportunities, which this would be a great one. The thing with the pickleball project, and we talked about this last year as well, if you'll recall, was the timing of the elementary school project. So I recently met with the school administration, and they will not have a final decision before going into this Springtown meeting. So, obviously, we don't want to move forward with something. This is the site we've selected that would be a great site. We could choose a secondary site if this becomes the site of the school, but this is really primary where we would like to do it, and just wait until the final school decision gets made. I think my recommendation at this point is, because we do have so much interest in this, and we know any place that's built pickleball, they're having, they're basically not meeting the demand that comes from just being able to serve in the community with this activity. So I think if there was a fall town meeting, we would be ready to bring it forward to then. So we have all of the estimates, and you see a layout of 6 courts we can actually fit on that footprint, with just a
Okay.
little bit of expansion.
And all you'd have to do is resurface it, isn't it?
So it would be a complete tear out. So
Would
there's
it?
the asphalt tennis courts are dilapidated. They do need to come out. So we would completely remove that.
So they still play street hockey on those courts?
They don't. I can't. I don't
I
want to hear
haven't-
about it.
I haven't sure seen it.
I thought they did.
Really?
No.
I don't know. They're
For a while it was
pretty
iced.
cracked at this point.
Yeah, it's very tough shape.
Yeah, I mean, we really recognize that something needs to be done there, and we really want to provide another recreation
Yeah,
opportunity.
you
We
brought
think-
that to our attention
We think
before.
pickleball's the right thing. So I don't want anybody, watching on TV to think that pickleball is not going to make it. It really is a great activity.
amazing how popular it
It's
is.
just the timing of it and making sure that we don't build something that will need to be relocated. So our next project is with the pool facility. As you know, we're constantly taking a look at the pool facility. We have actually a 10-year plan for our pool facility, looking out at what needs to be done with that. This is really a large-scale 15-year maintenance rehabilitation project. This is something that is not going to come along very often, and you can see by some of the age and
Yeah.
the timelines since we've done this last, that this is something that we've been looking at and we've been waiting on because we really haven't had the need. Our pool has been in really good shape. Our aquatic staff keeps up on all the maintenance and really does a good job taking care of it. But we do have some of our facility components that need to be taken a look at. So with the decking, you can see the decking is about to reach 50 years. So obviously it's had a great lifespan. I'll just show this picture to show kind of what's happening with the deck tiling. Basically, the adhesive to the subfloor is failing at this point. It's just the age of it. And what's happening is it's kind of popping, and then we're getting these sections that have to be repaired and patched. We are keeping up on the patching. In fact, when this happened, we didn't even have to close down. We were able to contain the section, fix it, and stay open in some capacity, which was great. But depending on where it happens, that could change. When we do patch this, because we're not actually taking a look at the subfloor and redoing the adhesive, we don't have any warranty on the sections that we're patching. So really this is to take a look at removing all of that. The recommendation is to retile, to go with a very similar tile product. It held up great. It held up great in the humid environment that we have. It's a very health and safety conscious choice in that we can keep it clean, and it's a non-slippery surface. So it's really a great.
Nicole, is that, do we know, is that the year the actual pool was put in, was 72, or is the pool even older than that?
I think, I want to say the pool is older than that. I
Don't
think
know.
mid-60s. I want to say 65 is the pool age.
Wow.
But I'm not sure on that, and I don't know
It
why.
has aged well, though. I mean,
It really
Well,
has.
we
I mean,
also
it's-
invested in
Yeah.
it too.
And it did have another large refurbishment when the high school was redone. And so I don't know exactly how long ago that was, but we're probably, 12 years or 13 years? Pam could tell us exactly.
Yeah, it was 15 plus years ago.
So we're getting to the age. So the other thing is, because this is a large-scale project, we'll be closing the pool down for this. So what we want to do is focus the timeline of the draining the pool and doing the refurbishment work that's going to happen inside the pool. So that's going to be some tile repair, some depth markers, inspection of drain covers, things that have to happen in the pool, and also in the pump room, things that will need to be switched out that, every 15 years or so you do that. We replace our sand filtration, all of those things will be done. So this will be done all at once. So this is a large-scale maintenance program for the pool that we will, only see every so often. I do want to point out that with the pool facility, we are constantly reinvesting into that facility. I actually pulled the numbers of over the past 10-plus years. From our recreation revolving fund, we've reinvested $216,000. So just want to, show that as far as keeping up on maintenance and doing those things, we are having all of that happen, and we're able to support that with this
And
pool
how much can
operation.
the revolving fund support annually? Is this capital request above and
This is
beyond
above
some
it,
additional
yeah.
money?
So, I mean, this 200,000 was done, I think, over a 13-year period was our data that we were able to track back in that. The last thing that we did that was a large-scale project that the revolving fund supported was the UV filtration. I actually do have a listing of what all the projects are. I can leave that with you if you'd like. Very interesting.
Glad you have it.
But yeah,
I think
mean,
what's important
I think the
is
important thing is that this is really a large-scale refurbishment.
what
that's
we need to
above
see is
what-
the overall cost of the project, because the capital request is probably, net of some support. So it'd be nice to, next time we see this, to have the detail of what's going into this item. And as we discussed with the Thurston lights, we'll see more on that.
Yep.
I think this one,
Breakdown.
we need a breakdown, and whether or not the revolving fund can support part of it. I'm assuming it can, but I shouldn't assume anything until you come back and tell us.
Okay. So yeah, we can absolutely put that breakdown together, and the deck tiling is the large component of that.
Great, okay.
And so this is a bit of an add-on, but we have, we've been researching storage options for the recreation department over the past several years. And we do have storage all over town, and mainly a lot of our storage is in the ICC. And so with the loss of that facility, we are going to need to address something for storage. We've reviewed a few options, and what we're really settling in on is an option to expand the garage that you mentioned, that one area. So there is space to expand the school and DPW garage that's at the high school. We've been working with the school department. They're actually considering expanding one bay on that garage too. And we would, collaborate on that project to expand for 2 bays, one for recreation and one additional for the school department. This site would allow us to have a site that's centrally located, close to where we are located and operating out of, gets cleared in the winter. Many of our storage facilities, once the snow comes, we can't get to them because they're storage type boxes. And would just give us a place to put everything from the ICC that we, need to have.
And
So
Nicole-
is it a prefab type add-on?
It is, yes.
And would you be able to get rid of those storage boxes that are on the high school
I
property?
think some of them we would be able to get rid of, and I know the school department would be interested in
Everybody would
seeing
be
us
happy if
take a
they
look
go,
at that. Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
So you're thinking
Madam
that could,
Chairman?
hold on a second, you're thinking this could come out of the
So
revolving
this
fund?
is, we are proposing this out of the revolving fund, and so I guess to speak to sort of the level, we do have some surplus in the revolving fund that we would like to use as a reinvestment. This seemed to us like a good area to reinvest, also because this is a real need. I mean, this is a critical need for
Yeah.
us to be able to deal with that this year, and we really
I
didn't
think
want to
what
take
we're
a
looking at
chance
too,
on-
Nicole, is all the requests for this year lining up and having, you talked to Pam about the best way to source funds for a project. I don't know if, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
I don't know if that's what Pam would say is the right way to allocate it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to review
It's nice to
that
know there are
fund,
some
and Pam and I can discuss
Yeah.
what's in there. We have had those discussions over the past several years,
Right.
and have been able, sort of where our
And given that the
line is
schools might be doing it
operationally
as
with
well,
that.
I don't know if revolving fund matches with a capital article for the school, so
Yeah,
we're not
and-
going to decide that
And they
tonight.
haven't decided on how they would fund theirs, or if they're going to move forward with that section. So that was just a preliminary conversation.
So resident historian in the Hearn household tells me that the pool was built with the old high school in the mid-'70s.
Oh, so it probably was that
So it probably
72.
was that, yeah, because I mean, it wouldn't
72.
make sense if it was 65 and then.
Yeah, it was
maybe
not built
replace the tile
alone.
already. Okay.
Because the middle school now was the high school at that point in time. So it was built when they built
Middle school now.
the old high school that,
That's great.
All right.
Good to know.
I appreciate all this. I think we've had some good discussion.
Yeah, and you'll
Any-
have some follow-up materials to look at
Yep.
for both the lighting
Thanks,
and the
Nicole.
First Parish, and, then we'll
Right.
be able to kind
We
of
look forward
have
to
our
getting that.
discussions on what to move
And
forward
once you get
with.
the study for the Thurston lights, we'd like that too.
Absolutely, as soon as we
Um,
get it.
That's great. And any other questions before we
No.
move along? Okay, thanks,
Thanks,
Nicole.
Nicole.
That's great.
Thank you, Nicole.
Town administrator appointments. So with our new town administrator, we have several positions that Mike Gillette held that we now need to appoint Chris Coleman to. I think I'll just name what they are. We have information on what each one involves, but I think we can just name what they are. American with Disabilities Act Coordinator, the Chief Procurement Officer, Compensation Agent, for housing director, municipal hearings officer, parking clerk. What's the job on the cemetery commission? Ex officio to cemetery commission. Ex officio to communications and technology advisory board. Director of the local emergency planning committee.
Ex officio.
Do we even need that? Is that committee still meeting? The open space and recreation plan committee?
No.
Nope, so we
No,
don't
it's
need
just
that. Pedestrian and bike safety committee, ex officio. Housing partnership fair housing
So you're
committee,
talking
ex
the old,
officio.
like Hoosier gym.
Alcohol review committee, member.
New gym, there's not.
Healthcare Review Committee member, John
Sure,
Cronin
Jim.
Public Service Award Committee member, Stormwater Management Committee member,
Yeah.
Westwood Emergency Management Agency member, okay, Comcast License Committee member, Hale Conservation Restriction, well, Hale Task Force, I think is what we should call that.
Ex officio. Yeah, ex officio.
I think it's more than ex officio. Yeah, it's a member of the committee. And do we make it chair, or does?
It's his
Okay,
committee.
that's what I thought. So we're just going to point you to the committee, and you can make yourself chair, Chris. How about that? That's the list we have tonight. So some are not on it, but I read the ones that are. I don't think we need to say them again. Any discussion before we appoint?
No.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Make it work.
I move that we appoint Christopher Coleman to the offices, boards, and committees currently held by the interim town administrator, Mike Gillette, for a term to end on June 30th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So that would be those committees that are still in effect, Tish, just to reiterate.
That would be on page 115
Old
of our
business, Westwood Media Center, we
report.
have
Transfer of funds.
transfer of funds, yes, so let me just get to that. Our usual piece of business is when we receive funds from Comcast and Verizon per our contracts for PEG access funding. We receive them and we in turn then redirect those funds to the Westwood Media Center. We have two amounts for Comcast, $20,602.40, and the second one, $3,296.37, and one from Verizon, $49,171.51. So this is a straightforward transfer like we've done in the past. Questions?
I move that we approve the transfer of $20,602.40 and $3,296.37 from Comcast, as well as $49,171.51 from Verizon, totaling $73,070.28 to the Westwood Media Center per the licensing agreement and the Westwood Media Center agreements signed by the Select Board.
I'm sorry, can you repeat those amounts? No. Second.
I'm going to make you memorize them and repeat them. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, and our last regular item on the agenda is,
Minutes. Oh,
no,
sorry.
before
Oh,
that, we have the
that's fine.
police chief contract.
Oh, yes.
We have put forth our terms for the new contract. The Chief Silva's contract expired June 30th. It was extended. We have negotiated an updated 3-year contract per the language in the town bylaws. The terms of the agreement are in general like the prior agreement, and with an update in compensation. And the chief has agreed to these terms, and tonight we are just voting to approve and sign the contract. Any questions?
Nope.
Discussion? Okay.
I move that we vote to approve and sign a 3-year contract for Chief Jeffrey Silva, Police Chief Jeffrey Silva.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So I imagine we'll be signing that. You have that paperwork tonight. And do you have a hard copy of the minutes? We have minutes from October 15th, 16th, and 28th to review and approve.
Oh, there's just one? Okay, perfect. Even better. Thank you.
Is that for you? Thank you. Okay, October 15th. Back to days of trick-or-treating. Any questions or changes?
Nope.
Nope. So I move that we approve the Select Board Minutes of October 15, 2019, consisting of 6 pages as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. We had a meeting on October 16th to honor Mr. Gillette, and it was very brief, but that was the purpose of the meeting.
So I move that we approve the minutes of October 16, 2019, consisting of 1 page.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. And lastly, October 28th minutes, any edits?
No. Already had a chance to read them. So I move that we approve the Select Board minutes of October 28, 2019, consisting of 10 pages as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. Okay, we are not going into executive session tonight. Our next meeting is next week, Monday, December 16th, and we look forward to seeing everybody then. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Hickey.